I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we would like to thank Ms. Nakamitsu for presenting the latest report by the General Director of OPCW on the implementation of the Council Resolution 2111. Unfortunately, it's basically a carbon copy of the previous report. These documents have long been constructed on the assumption of guilt on the part of Damascus. No matter the steps that the Syrians are undertaking to move towards OPCW, that's never enough. In principle, all of the information that we get in the Security Council from the Technical Secretariat, we can just sum up in this way without wasting the Council's time every month by discussing identical reports. Especially since practice has shown that the Syrian chemical dossier doesn't suffer from discussing it less frequently. Our positions as regards the baseless claims against Syria, first and foremost in the context of its initial declaration, is something that we have voiced many times, and I do not want to go into detail today. In this report, what struck us is yet another inconsistency in the accusatory narrative accusing the Syrians. The center of that narrative is the idea that the Syrian party is uncooperative when it comes to the mission to assess the initial declaration. And this is based on one single argument, the fact that one member of the mission was not issued a visa. Well, first of all, let me recall here that cooperation with the mission is part of the voluntary bilateral undertakings that Syria took upon itself voluntarily. But even if you set this aside, the next question arises. And the question is this. Is it that the entire bilateral cooperation between the Technical Secretariat and the Syrians hinges on one single expert? What will happen if this expert is unable to travel to Syria for other reasons? Would this mean that the Technical Secretariat would use this as a valid reason to cancel the 25th round consultation and the discussion of the initial declaration in Syria? But this is something that is very important. Our Western colleagues talk about it all the time. Will it then be paused in this situation? By the way, speaking of visas, the Russian experts who are to participate in activities at the UN in New York are encountering the issue of visa non-issuance all the time, even though the host country is under obligation to issue it in a timely manner. And we can see that these visa-related accusations against the Syrians are double standard. And we have the following question. Where are the guarantees that even if the Syrian side decides to issue this visa to the expert, the Technical Secretariat is not going to come up with new artificial pretexts so as to delay the consultations once again and put the blame on Damascus? Let me recall here that the Syrians were ready to host members of the team in summer last year. But the Director General of OPCW, Arias, publicly refused to send the mission because he said that the climate would be uncomfortable for the members to work. As a result of that, there was a serious delay in the consultations. There's nothing about this in the report, only yet another series of attempts to shift the blame on the Syrians. Therefore, the new excuses by the Technical Secretariat and the Director General we view as the following. The Hague is simply not interested in a constructive talk with the Syrian side on the issue of the initial declaration. We also think that it is not normal that the Director General, 4 years in this post, has been avoiding a visit to Syria so far. In this regard, we would like to ask Ms. Nakamitsu, from the viewpoint of your vast UN experience and the practice of UN Secretariat, how widespread is a situation where a leader has never visited the country which is in the focus of the attention of the entity he heads, and only knows about the situation on the ground from the reports given to him by his staff? Are there other examples of this with the UN? We think that this political selection is a very negative effect on the effectiveness of OPCW in discharging its mandate. Madam President. We are commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Convention on Chemical Weapons, its entry into force. We were at the very inception of the convention, so for us, being committed to its implementation is not a simple formality. We think it's our moral duty to dutifully implement the convention and help its strengthen it. And that is why, despite a difficult context, we supported the consensus on the President's statement submitted today. The Libyan resolution also something that we supported, but for some reason was still criticized for it. We are proud of the fact that Russia already in 2017, ahead of schedule and under strict international control, fully fulfilled its obligations on eliminating chemical weapons. This is endorsed in the OPCW Director General's report of the 5th of October 2017. And we call on others to follow our example, those who have not yet discharged their obligations under the convention. We are paying tribute to the convention as a unique disarmament mechanism. There is no alternative for it. Eliminating the Syrian chemical potential is an example of how the convention can be effective. Acceding to the OPCW, Damascus diligently fulfilled all of its commitments, and this Secretary General's report on that to the Security Council in June 2014. The final elimination of the chemical potential of Syria was also confirmed in 2016 by the Executive Council at the Conference of States Parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention. This became possible because of the firm commitment of the Syrian authorities to the political decision to give away on their military chemical program and the choice made by the international community in favor of conventional mechanisms. But no matter how unique an instrument the convention is, what is of principal importance is how its provisions are implemented by the OPCW. And in this regard, the organization over 25 years had registered high points and, unfortunately, and we've seen recently, come downs. Several years ago, we began seeing the first shoots of the dangerous trend to politicize OPCW, and these shoots by now are in full bloom. As the Syrian chemical dossier has shown, from an independent and unbiased guardian, of the convention, the OPCW becomes an instrument for what the Western countries. Its governing bodies are being imposed an illegitimate decision so as to give the technical secretariat prosecutorial functions. And in violation of the norms, biased investigations are being conducted, and then they're used to exert political pressure. This technical secretariat itself is persecuting the free thinkers who refuse to sign off on the political orders given from above. The leadership of the technical secretariat, at the same time, is avoiding a direct discussion of this and has no intention of rectifying these things. We have a long list of such egregious examples by now. This includes the infamous FFM report on the Duma incident in 2018. The final version of it was drastically redacted to make it anti-Syrian under the pressure exerted by some delegation and in the face of obvious facts to the contrary. And a shameful stain also here is the activity by the investigation and identification team. Its creation was rammed through in the Executive Council in violation of the principle of consensus and Article 15. And the flaw methodology of IIT and FFM is a violation of conventions in terms of conducting investigations, collections of evidence, and the chain of custody. The reports are being prepared whilst using information collected remotely from very partial sources, first and foremost the notorious white helmets. And the culmination of these practices was that for the first in the history of the organization, a sovereign state in implementing the convention in good faith had his rights suspended. And this punitive decisions was rammed through by Western delegations violations of norms and consensus. This led to the fact that at its 25th anniversary, OPCW has very serious systemic problems and a tarnished reputation. Damage was also done to the integrity of the convention itself, and we're very worried about this. And the situation is not rectified. OPCW will lose its prestige in the very near future. It will become an instrument to implement the geopolitical tasks of a very narrow group of countries. The convention will become a punitive instrument, and this will strike a blow to the foundations of the chemical weapons prohibition regime and non-proliferation architecture as a whole, and will give right to distrust to other international instruments in the area of WMD non-proliferation. We call upon the leadership of the organization to reach conclusions, rectify mistakes, and restore the spirit of OPCW, which was professional, depoliticized coordination, and aim it at real challenges the international community faces in terms of disarmament and non-proliferation. First and foremost, when it comes to the threats of using toxic chemicals and warfare agents by terrorist and extremist entities. Mr. Arias was re-elected to the position of Director General and now has a second chance to do that. In conclusion, I would like to yet once again emphasize the following. Despite the politicization problem, the convention itself remains important and relevant. This document remains the only example of universal multilateral treaty which bans a whole class of weapons of mass destruction. Russia unconditionally and indeed supports the convention and is committed to its letter and spirit. What gives rise to question to us is how its provisions are being implemented by the OPCW. But we were convinced that provided there is political will by the leadership of the organization, it is possible to correct the current issues. We stand ready to help it, to do everything for that, and call on other members of the Council to do the same. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement.